So basically, this guy has created quite a massive shitstorm back home, and we're just going to review his content at verbaldarrell, and let's just dissect some of the arguments that he's been making online.
A platform called Wake Up Singapore posted this picture above and described it as enabling racism. Now, I've been in the education industry for almost 20 years, and personally, I've never encountered a preference for tutor's race.
I wonder why.
I don't think it's necessary, but I wouldn't go in as far as to describe that as enabling racism. We must stop fanning and stoking racial tensions over every single little thing that makes for controversy and viewership. The Ngee lecturer incident, that was racism. Racially motivated assaults, racism for sure. Racist remarks made by former property agent, yes, racism. But I don't think that if an elderly Malay couple prefers to rent their apartment to only Indians or Malay tenants, or a Chinese couple looking to hire a Chinese math tutor for their daughter.
Okay, wait. The first one actually it's a funny example that he just decides to bring up because the inverse is actually true. It's been well documented that Chinese landlords don't like to rent out to Malays and Indians for whatever reason, mostly being race and of holding racist belief. So if he were to flip the script and say if an elderly Malay couple prefers to rent to only Indian or Malays, then yes, that is racist. Or a Chinese couple looking to hire a Chinese math tutor for their daughter, yes, that is also racist because numbers come in the form of symbols and numerical icons. So how does that translate to needing a Chinese person to teach that? Basically, anyway, most of our exams are written in English anyway. So definitely those preferences would be most likely seen as racist unless you can give a proper or a very good counter argument, but let's see.
I don't think those preferences amount to racism. The irony is this: removing freedom of choice when it comes to preference for tutors or tenants' race under the premise of racial.
Okay, so removing freedom of choice for who? For the provider or for the buyer, right? Because when the civil rights movement and act was established, white people couldn't no longer be able to go open up a store and not sell to black people. They have to serve all the races. So in that sense, they also lack that freedom to choose whoever they wanted to sell to, right? So who is this benefiting? I think that is a question that he has to answer himself. Next, he claims that this more racial integration can actually lead to undercurrents of racial tensions instead. Okay. This is stirring up a lot of moral panic. So, undercurrents. Then again, I go back to my earlier example where you would have, because of the Civil Rights Act, you would have to sell to all races and you cannot discriminate who you're selling to. And then would that also create more undercurrents of racial tensions? No, actually, the racial tensions improved right after that. So it's very strange that he would come up with this argument. Maybe he believes that people become more secretly racist, and then if it's in secret, then so what? What's the net implication of that? If they're not imposing their racist beliefs or actions onto others, then they can be secretly racist all they want. Who cares?
Harmony may lead, in fact, to more undercurrents of racial tensions instead. Many individuals make race-related choices that make them a little more comfortable for whatever personal reason. That doesn't make them racist. They're not hateful or unkind. Perhaps some mentalities ought to be adjusted with time, but they are anything but racist. As a matter of fact, I don't think Champion Tutor or Bright Tutor were enabling racism. Let's not reach a point where many of us Singaporeans walk on eggshells, fearing that our preferences may constitute racism, fearing that we may unwittingly find ourselves doxxed or cancelled for being racist when it isn't the case.
Yeah, keyword when it isn't. So still, I've not heard why a certain race has to be preference over others when it comes to tutoring. Like, it's just beyond weird, right?
Preserving racial harmony also means that we have to avoid unnecessarily stoking racial tensions. A platform called Wake Up.
Okay. Didn't really say much, I guess, but let's look at the comments. Okay, so apparently I found he actually had Google Docs made to go a little bit more in depth into what he was talking and to justifying his arguments a bit more. So I'm just going to go over the certain stuff that I've read that I don't agree with and go through that. He quickly states that he has some backing in what he's saying, and then he has met other students who felt that his argument was actually true in some regard, and that we shouldn't, racialize everything, and state that preference and racism shouldn't be intertwined in that sense. And then he goes on to saying, surely you shouldn't discount these views if you claim to desire a free, equal, pluralistic society. Well, actually, I don't think anyone is discounting these kind of views, right? The flaw in his argument here is that he's equating bad ideas and society, right? So society is free. It's so free that we can come up with all these ideas. It's so free that I can disagree with these ideas. It will only be unequal or limited or restricted in freedom if we are not able to disagree with each other, right? So if we are discounting these views, I don't think many people are discounting these views at all. We are hearing them, but we are also letting you know that these views are bad. There can be bad ideas, right? So whereas in a society that is free, equal, and pluralistic, we'll have many ideas, but in the marketplace of ideas, the better ones usually rise to the top and the other ones get discounted, or the other ones get discredited or shunned or mocked or made fun of or thrown out because it's simply just a bad idea or not the best, right? So moving on. Then he goes on to say that he disagrees that the consumption of goods and services are subjected to the same regulations and ethics of hiring. They are different matters. And I reject this premise that consumption of goods and services are rejected to the same regulations of hiring, but there must be measures in place. If not, store owners can choose who they consume their goods, right? I can say that, I don't want a certain race to enjoy my product because what I have crafted will only benefit my race, which only knows how to enjoy this, right? Okay, and that secondly, he goes on to say also that he disagrees that an individual who worked hard to earn his keep should have to justify why he chose one service over another. But then this is quite a straw man, because justifying reason of purchase has nothing to do with what was in the news, or not in the news, or was in the controversy of causing such shit in the first place, which was why are tuition centers allowing race to be a preference for parents to choose tutors for their kids, right? He also goes on to say that the public scrutinizes stuff which isn't in the spirit of democracy, which is really weird, right? Because the public does already scrutinize and should scrutinize your consumption habits, especially if it causes harm. But whether it does so or not has nothing to do with democracy, but more so rather the materialistic nature of the human mind. Look at Naomi when she bought a Lamborghini. Many people were talking about it. Should they have done it? I don't know, but it's a democracy. People want to talk about it. They are exercising whatever freedom of speech that they have, online, offline, whatever. Who cares, right? So then, to sum up about democracy and having that freedom, the public would be able to have a say and the freedom of speech to do so. In such a society that is democratic, yes, but should they? That's another question. Okay, then he goes on to say that imagine the public scrutinizing your consumption habits. Well, it depends. Am I using public funds? Am I in governance? Am I doing something, creating something with a lot of influence? Am I causing bad? Right? I think that should be the main question. I don't really care if the public scrutinizes anyone's consumption habits. I don't think that is society that is plausible in any sense, because no one has the time to do that for everybody. But that, I think, raises another interesting question in regards to personal preferences, because they usually are held to a lower standard. But should they? Right? And in the grand scheme of things, what do they account for? If you are a billionaire and you are using your money to oppress others, then why shouldn't you be scrutinized in that sense? Anyways, he goes on to say, he disagrees that anyone's racial preferences is always steeped in racist beliefs. But then, in this sense, yes, I agree that not always are they racist if they have racial preferences. But these racial preferences, depending on which situations that arise, can actually help to structure racism on an institutional level. There are four levels of racism that you could look at. So whilst yes, they are not being racist on an interpersonal level, they can be racist on a structural or on an institutional level. Okay, so next he goes on to say, if your uncle chooses to patronize only Chinese barbers because he has always done so and is very happy and comfortable bantering away in a Chinese dialect with his barber, that doesn't mean he's racist, right? But then again, he's making a very, very weird argument. He's actually comparing oranges to apples here, and this is why. So, in the earlier example that Wake Up Singapore has posted, in that example, right, the choices, preferences that were elected for was based solely on internal factors, which shouldn't be the case, right? No, so in this example, he is just making a case for race-based choices based on internal factors. Whereas if I'm sending my kid for tuition, I don't see why it should be the case, because it is my internal factors shouldn't matter. Because my internal factors shouldn't matter. My biases will not reflect on how well my child will be taught at all. So this is a really, really bad example. Because a haircut is merely 15 to 30 minutes and the freedom of choosing another barber is self-imposed, but for choosing a tutor for your children is less based on whether or not your tutor can banter with you, but whether they can teach your child well and get the grades you desire. With that said, most, if not all, children these days cannot speak dialect, and most importantly, can speak English, so it will not impede their communication and personal relations with the tutor. And if it does, that's what tuition's all about. You go there to get better at it. Okay, so if Chinese parents of an 8-year-old girl choose to get a Chinese female for their daughter because they know their daughter will take to a Chinese female stranger more easily, these parents are neither racist nor sexist. They want the best for their daughter for personal reasons that they don't have to account to us. So this is just a lot of assumptions at once. So I think there's a term for it, gish galloping, right? Okay, and I'll explain why. So if the Chinese parents choose their a female tutor for their Chinese daughter because they know, quote unquote, know. First of all, how they know, right? Are they reading the minds? Are they asking the daughter? And if the daughter is actually saying, yeah, I want a Chinese and I want a female, must be girl, whatever, this is a great time for a parent to then teach them multicultural values and inclusivity and sort of clear up any distortions that they have about race or gender, right? Not necessarily, because in this case, I'm guessing that they are basing their decisions off assumptions that if they get a Chinese female, uh, they will necessarily know how to speak Chinese, or they will be more feminine, or they will be less fierce than a guy or whatever. But that's not necessarily the case, right? That's just based off wholly of assumptions here and generalizations. And secondly, they also say that this is best for their daughter, which is highly subjective. Okay, I would say it's actually best for the daughter to be exposed as much as she can, which would reflect her working or living environments in the future, which is a multicultural society. Unless the parents themselves knows for some weird reason that the daughter is going to work and live in a single or homogeneous race community, then sure, right? But that's impossible. And lastly, if comfort is really the best for your child, then don't give them a curfew. Then let them use their phones all day. Let them do whatever they want. Cook, clean, and pamper for them, right? After all, comfort is the best, right? Obviously not. So, okay, next. If an elderly couple is renting out rooms in the HDB flat and only ask for Chinese tenants because it will make them more comfortable to live with the tenants of the same cultural and racial background, it will be evil to label them racist. Okay, again, so comfort is the premise here, right? So we need to dig a bit more deeper into that. If comfort is the premise, we need to understand why. This comfort is usually based on generalization, which is again assuming certain races will not know how to abide by the house rules as well as other races, right? Whatever that may be, could be in regards to food or alcohol, which is I think the case that he's trying to make here, which is in whole racist, because who says Malay needs to be Muslim? Who says Indians don't know about Chinese culture and all that? And maybe even other Chinese don't even know about their own culture, so they might be really weirded out as to why the elderly couple is doing such things, or doing some prayers, or doing some cultural traditions, right? And that is can be easily solved with communication, and the communication can be gone off through any race. It doesn't mean, oh, because I'm Chinese then I will understand my Chinese relatives better. No, that's not true at all. And also, in the grand scheme of things, again, right, landlord racism is a huge problem in Singapore. It's been well documented. Again, I don't have to go through this. Okay, and then next he says, and then yeah, I mean, okay, and then he says that it's evil to label them racist, but actually no, it's just calling what it is. It is the truth, right? So instead of just demonizing the truth, just don't sugarcoat it. It is racist. Just call it racist. And then he goes on to say that the older folk hold dear to them stereotypes that may not be necessarily helpful to society. So okay, then he is then conceding that it's racist lah, these views. Anyways, but surely you aren't going to play this racist card on them for being stuck with that mindset. Do you discount how much of their sweat, blood went into this nation? Are they really not entitled to their racial preferences in this instance? Yes, because these racial preferences are harming others. That's the bottom line. Okay, and also he's using this really weird sunk cost fallacy. Okay, just because someone has done something before, it doesn't dictate or entitle to them anything in the present or the future, especially in the instance where it can cause harm. An example, right, of this would be, imagine a husband comes home drunk and then beats his wife. Will you not call him a wife beater or defend him just because he had a very nice and loving relationship in the past with his wife before? No, right? You just call the police and get him arrested for doing something that's fucked up. Next, okay, if a PRC family chooses a Chinese tutor to teach their son English so that the tutor can converse with them and their son in Chinese, many see this as a language preference. Honestly, can you completely dissociate race with language, religious belief, cultural practice? These are interwoven ideas, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so with this, right, this is an instance where you really can't really please everybody if, let's say, you were to take race out of that criteria selection, right? But then again, my question to him would be, why would you prioritize the PRC over your own citizens? The government should prioritize the citizens that they are governing, right? So I don't. So should we just give our vaccines to the PRCs and all of the non-citizens in Singapore first? No, it doesn't really make sense. But also, it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game, right? It doesn't have to be a win-lose thing. You can basically make a special request which can solve the problem in the first place. But minorities don't have such recourse, so that's the thing that you got to take in mind, right? They don't have a special request to get more jobs because they've been discriminated against. They can basically, if they're coming to Singapore, which our first language is English itself, I think after spending years in the country, I probably think they should be able to pick up some basic conversational skills that will not really impede their relationship or their ability to send or to gain from or to benefit from sending their child, right? So I don't see how the majority, or I don't see why the whole country should adopt to them at all. It can be inclusive, sure, but it would be much better and beneficial for them to actually go for tuition themselves, pick up the language, since it is, our first language anyways. I've basically looked at the whole thing. I'm going to structure my points more coherently in the document and then post up my response, and then if he responds, we'll have a debate. If not, then I guess that's it. Alright, peace.